Today's case is open-ended in the eyes of the law, as it is one that continues to be investigated 11 years after the incident. As I have done before, I will go over the case as the investigation has detailed it, then jump into some of my personal theories and insights on the matter. June 2nd, 2011, 20-year-old college student at Indiana University, Lisanne Spierer went out for a night of fun, but was never seen after her last appearance in the early hours of June 3rd. Lisanne was a sophomore studying fashion merchandising who had just finished her second year at IU and was taking a summer course before heading to New York for an internship at anthropology. She, however, would never make it to New York, as her last known whereabouts were in Bloomington, Indiana. At the time of the disappearance, Lisanne was dating a man by the name of Jesse Wolfe, and on the night of her disappearance was out with friends named Jay Rosenbaum, David Rohn, and Corey Rossman. Out of that list of people, it is somewhat important to note that Lisanne's boyfriend was not in attendance the night of her disappearance, and instead was in text message contact with her before he went to bed. The night's events begin with witness reports as early as 12:30 a.m., noting that Spierer was seen leaving her apartment with her friend David Rohn. They then went to Jay Rosenbaum's apartment and met with Jay's neighbor Corey Rossman before heading to Kilroy's sports bar. Surveillance footage shows Lisanne entering the bar at 1:46 a.m. and then again exiting the bar less than an hour later at 2:26 with Corey Rossman. Lisanne had left both her shoes and her cell phone at the bar. Rossman walked with Lisanne back to her apartment complex, and at 2:30 a.m. she is seen on surveillance cameras entering Smallwood Plaza Apartments. A passerby named Zach Oakes noticed her level of inebriation and asked if she was okay. At this point in time, Lisanne was very visibly intoxicated to the point where Corey had physically helped her walk. At the apartment complex, Corey and Lisanne took the elevator to Lisanne's fifth-floor apartment, but before they could reach the unit, Corey was confronted by a group of concerned students worried about Lisanne's state of intoxication. As the two groups argued, one of the students grew irritated with Corey and punched him in the face. He and Lisanne retreated to the lobby of the complex and decided to head to Corey's apartment at 5 North Townhomes. At 2:48 a.m., after she left the apartments, Lisanne entered an alley that runs between College Avenue and Morton Street. Security cameras mounted on nearby apartments show her exit the alley at 2:51 a.m. and walk toward an empty lot. Spierer's keys and purse were found along this route through the alley. Lisanne and Corey arrived at Rossman's apartment shortly afterward, where Michael Beth, Corey's roommate, was currently staying. Corey himself was very intoxicated and stumbling. He vomited on the carpet on the way upstairs, and Michael has stated that he escorted Corey to bed. He then tried to persuade Lisanne to sleep over for her own safety. He claimed that she said she wanted to return to her own apartment. At 3:30 a.m., Michael phoned his neighbor Jay Rosenbaum, wanting him to take care of Lisanne. Michael had said that she was attempting to get him to drink with her at her own apartment. She eventually went to Rosenbaum's apartment, where he observed a bruise under her eye that she presumably sustained in a fall earlier in the night. Jay attempted to persuade her to sleep on his couch instead of walking back to her apartment, and Lisanne refused. Even though it was 4:15 a.m., she wanted to continue drinking. Jay backed off, and she left 15 minutes later to walk back to Smallwood Plaza. Jay is the last confirmed sighting of Lisanne, who was barefoot, still intoxicated, and without her cell phone. He watched her travel down 11th Street and turn right at the intersection of College Avenue, with her apartment complex being only 3 blocks away. As we now know that she never made it to her apartment, it is interesting that neither Michael nor Jay had realized that she was missing her keys following her fall in the alley around 2:50 a.m., and that she would not be able to get into her apartment even if she had returned. The following morning, Jessie tried to reach Lisanne through her cell phone, but an employee at Kilroy's answered and explained the phone had been left at the bar the previous night. Jessie, worried about Lisanne, contacted Lisanne's roommates to see if she was home. However, her bedroom was empty and there were no signs it had been slept in that night. Word of Lisanne's absence quickly spread among her social circle, and they all grew concerned. At 4:30 p.m., Lisanne Spierer was reported missing by her boyfriend, Jesse Wolfe. Lisanne's parents and older sister arrived the next day, and a search began with hundreds of volunteers and nationwide coverage of her disappearance. Small businesses, the IU student body, and the synagogue Lisanne attended collectively were able to gather a $120,000 reward for any information on Lisanne's case. However, despite the extensive efforts made, still under 24 hours after her disappearance, no new information was found. Jay Rosenbaum, Corey Rossman, Jesse Wolf, and Lauren's friend from the complex were quickly subjected to public scrutiny as police began to piece together their version of the night's events. As a result, they each hired their own private attorneys. Jay Rosenbaum, the last person to see Lauren alive, was the first person investigators approached. He first saw Lauren when she showed up to the pregame with her friend, one of whom told him they had snorted Klonopin, a drug similar to Xanax, beforehand. When Lauren later returned from Kilroy's with Corey, she used Jay's phone to try and reach David Cohn, the friend she attended the pregame with before, and dozed off. She woke up and Jay tried to convince her to stay, but Lauren refused, so he walked her to his door and watched her leave. Police canvassed nearby houses and businesses for any potential security camera footage. While they could not find footage of Lauren turning on College Avenue, they could see the video of her journey throughout the night, from her time at Kilroy's to the shortcut through the alley with Corey. In one video, Lauren was so drunk that Corey flung her over his shoulder in a firefighter's carry. Most importantly, surveillance footage at 5 North Townhomes confirmed his account that Lauren had left around 4:30 a.m. wearing a white t-shirt, black pants, a gold bracelet, and still had no shoes. Police released a still from the video to the media where it quickly attracted national attention. Jesse Wolf, Lauren's boyfriend, participated in the initial search efforts until he was intercepted by his parents. Since then, communication between him and Lauren's parents has been lackluster. Although witnesses claim he was sleeping in his off-campus apartment that night, police have been unable to confirm his account altogether. Jay Rosenbaum's attorney told local news that their client fully cooperated with investigators and even passed a polygraph test. Police have never confirmed this, and Lauren's parents claim that Jay, Corey, and Jesse have not cooperated fully with the investigation. Corey Rossman was much more combative with police and the media. He reportedly told investigators that after being punched, he blacked out and had no memory of the rest of the night. He would later recall to USA Today that his lawyer, not himself, made that claim. He willingly gave a DNA sample but refused to speak to the media about Lauren, even threatening legal action against reporters who showed up to his home. When he did speak to reporters in 2011, he is quoted saying, "I was not the last person with her, and that's all I can say. I'm sorry. But I just hope they find her as soon as possible, and I am praying for her and her family." Lauren's parents, Charlene and Rob Spierer, have been adamant that Lauren's friends know more than they have said and have filed a civil suit against Corey Rossman, Jay Rosenbaum, and Corey's then roommate Michael Beth in 2013. The case claimed that the three supplied an underage Lauren with alcohol and failed to protect her the night she disappeared. However, a judge dropped the lawsuit, stating the defendants had no duty to watch Lauren, especially since Corey was intoxicated that night too. In an interview with the Journal News, Jesse Wolf's mother referred to Charlene and Rob Spierer as, quote, liars, and expressed her lack of trust in the Bloomington Police Department. Most notably, she blamed Lauren's disappearance on her, quote, drug abuse, which had been the cause of several problems in her relationship with Jesse. Nadine Wolf, Jesse's mother, said Lauren would abuse drugs to the point where she would black out and that Jesse always threatened to call and tell her parents, and she said, "If you do, I'll break up with you." When Lauren vanished, Nadine said Jesse was in intensive therapy for years, feeling as if he had, quote, lost the love of his life. She ended her interview with defense of Jesse and ominous words for Lauren. Quote, "The one night she went out without him and did what she did, unfortunately, cost her her life." Multiple witnesses confirmed seeing Lauren do or talk about doing drugs that night, and a small amount of cocaine was found in a search of her room. Charlene told ABC, quote, "I don't think Lauren made wise choices that night, but people don't go missing on their own." While the point she makes here definitely makes sense, the frustration of the families of the others involved makes sense as well, since Charlene and Rob really seemed eager to point all of the blame at somebody else without first acknowledging the actions that Lauren made that could have contributed to her unfortunate disappearance. This is not, however, to say that Lauren is solely responsible for what happened to her, but rather pointing out the poor decisions she made as opposed to painting her as a flawless angel can give police and others a better understanding of the full story of what happened that night. Acknowledging her drug habits can be paramount in finding out what was going through Lauren's head the night she went missing, just as much as the actions of those around her matter too. That night, security footage showed a white pickup truck circling the block near where Lauren was last found. The driver was identified as James McClish, a convicted felon who was recently out on parole for assaulting his ex-wife and living at a halfway house about 10 minutes away from Lauren's last known location. Police initially dismissed claims alleging that he killed Lauren, but private investigators requested that James perform a polygraph. He agreed and passed the test. Over the following years, police and volunteers conducted many searches for Lauren. Dive teams have searched in the waters of Lake Monroe and other nearby bodies of water. Searchers scoured the surrounding wood areas several times. Local area sex offenders were pressed for potential involvement, and a search warrant issued in 2015 for one offender's property remained sealed. To date, Bloomington police have followed up on hundreds of tips, and in an interview in 2021, they clarified Lauren's case had not gone cold. Within the past 3 years, they've received over 800 additional tips and executed over 10 search warrants. Still, any progress on Lauren's case remains undisclosed. Lauren Spierer has now been missing for 11 years. As of 2022, the case remains unsolved. Police continue to follow a steady stream of leads, and for those who knew Lauren, they hope the wait for answers will soon be over. So, I would like to just first start off and say that I think that there's not really a debate on whether or not this is foul play. I think that it's pretty obvious that it's foul play. Whether or not it involved the men that were with Lauren of the night of her disappearance, I kind of doubt that it is, because all of their stories, while maybe a little bit different, or they might not have provided all the details to the police as they should have, they technically did provide enough information that the police were able to put Lauren in the locations that they said they were at the approximate times based on the surveillance cameras that they found around the area. Lastly, and most importantly, they found the surveillance footage of Lauren leaving the 5 North townhomes around 4:30 in the morning. So they couldn't confirm whether or not she actually turned onto College Avenue and started heading that direction. I don't really understand how Jay says that he saw her turn on to the street, because in another account it sounded like he just led her to the door, and the doors of that apartment, as far as I can tell, or as far as I can remember from my time in Bloomington, is that they don't really see that intersection. He would have had to have walked with her to a certain extent. And on top of that, we have security footage from further down that block that we can see when we saw the white pickup truck. So I feel like those would have caught her on camera if she had made it past there. So it doesn't really make much sense as to how she got further than that spot. But we all know that she was very intoxicated and probably under the influence of other drugs other than just alcohol. But at the same time, that would make her extremely vulnerable to somebody who was looking to do something nefarious. Now, again, I believe that it wasn't any of the men that were with her and recorded to be with her that night. It was odd that her boyfriend Jesse was not contacted by any of them, but I digress on that point. It seems like they had involvement in the fact that she got intoxicated, but didn't have involvement in her disappearance itself. As seen with the attempted lawsuit against them by Lauren's parents, it's also not really going to hold up well in court when you say, oh, well, they should have been looking after her. She is an adult, and it's not their responsibility to make sure that she gets where she's going. It's more of a courtesy thing. Legally speaking, they don't necessarily need to make sure that she gets home. It is, again, it's a courtesy thing. They should have done that. And for what it seems, and maybe this is just something that they had stated later after the fact to try and make it sound better, they did try and insist on her sleeping off some of the effects of the alcohol and or drugs before attempting to go back to her apartment. Now, her walk to Smallwood Plaza was not very far. It's about 2 or 3 blocks. Personally, I lived in Bloomington for 4 years. I know what that distance is like. And while, yes, being out that late at night is going to put you in a vulnerable position, that is a very centered student housing, off-campus housing part of town. So a lot of the people around there are going to be students at that time of night. Not saying that students couldn't do something nefarious, as they often are also the perpetrators of these crimes. And it could have easily been a student or just somebody local that committed something in this case. Now, I did mention just a second ago, I did live in Bloomington. I attended Indiana University. However, it was not at the time of Lauren's disappearance. I was well aware of the case when I went there. I didn't really know the details of it. However, I had heard about it both in high school and in college. A lot of awareness was brought to it. Even in my days, I was living around that area that it happened between the years of 2017 and 2020. And my apartment was actually at 10th in college. And if you know, the last known location was 11th in College Street. And my apartment in that complex actually was the corner apartment that faces the alley that she walked down. Now, there's a few things I want to say about that alley that probably should be noted. There's a lot of visuals. There's a lot of balconies around there, both from the apartment complex that I was staying in. All the apartments on all 3 floors have balconies there that overlook that alley, as well as the ones across the alley. There's townhomes with rooftop balconies, and a lot of people going straight in their doors right there. So a lot of people would have witnessed this. It's not what you think of as like a sketchy back alley. It's a very, very populated area. In fact, you're probably more likely to run into somebody there than you are to run into somebody on the street at that time of night. There's often a lot of people partying. However, this was on June 3rd, so this is actually after the spring semester was over, and this is during the summer. Now, if I know anything about Bloomington, it's that the summertime, it becomes a little bit of a ghost town. There are maybe 10%, and I'm just spitballing here, of the student population that actually sticks around on campus during the summer. Primarily students that can't easily go home during the summer. But if you don't have summer classes and you can easily go home, typically students would go home for the whole summer. And they would either have, unless they had jobs in Bloomington, if they had jobs in Bloomington or summer classes, they would stay. But those are really the 2 exceptions. So there wasn't a lot of people that stayed there. And I was surprised as to how many people were just out and about at this time of night during the summer. There's always going to be that party crowd that sticks around, but it does seem like an awful lot of people stuck around, at least compared to what I had experienced and seen. It's a noticeable difference of how many people are there during the summer as opposed to during the spring and fall semesters. Due to the lack of people that are on campus, at least students that are on campus or around campus at that time of year, I am more inclined to think that it was probably somebody that was either local to the Bloomington area or somewhere in the surrounding area that did cause this foul play. Now again, I say it has to be foul play no matter what, because regardless of if Lauren got into something herself, maybe she succumbed to her toxicity and was injured enough from all the falling over the night, that she would have been found at the very least. Even if it was self-done and she was the only one that ended up making herself go missing, she would have been found. All of Bloomington and all of the surrounding area was searched relentlessly, and it's still being searched to this day. And even her parents have basically, I wouldn't say given up hope, but they have assumed that Lauren is dead by now. And that seems to be a safe assumption, because that spot that she disappeared from, while in the middle of the night it might not be populated, that is a very central part of town where hundreds upon hundreds of people are walking past that location every day. And there's no way that she could have gotten within even a square mile where not one person would find her. So it implies that Somebody had to have picked her up in a car of some sort or taken her against her will somewhere, whether it was against her will or we know that she was still trying to drink. Maybe somebody she knows picked her up. That's also a possibility. So we know that she was taken away somewhere because this is the middle of a college town where she couldn't just disappear in the blink of an eye with no trace at all. Now, the only real piece of evidence that we have of somebody being in the area was the white pickup truck that was also caught on surveillance camera. And that leads me to questions of how they didn't catch Lauren on those same security cameras, because those seem to be from the street of College Avenue, where they caught those pictures of the white pickup truck. I feel like they would have caught Lauren on foot, but it doesn't really make sense that she wasn't seen at all unless there was a car that was involved. And I feel like the police probably did their due diligence and checked all the surveillance cameras around the time that they saw that she left the apartments and started heading back to hers. Again, she would not have been able to get into her apartment even if she had made it all the way back to Smallwood, because we know that when she was in the alley, she had fallen over and dropped her keys and purse. So at this point, she basically just has her shirt, her pants, and her bracelet, no phone, no shoes, no keys, no purse, and for all we know, she was still trying to go out and drink, because that's what Jay's testimony was saying, and that she was still trying to do that even past 4 a.m, even though clearly she needed to sober up and go home. I believe it's also very easy as an outsider for us to kind of look at Corey's involvement and see that it was clearly irresponsible of him to let her get as intoxicated as she did, especially since, as far as I could tell, he was the one that knew her the very least out of the group of friends that she was with, and yet he was with her the majority of the night. He also was just as intoxicated as her, if not more. By the time they got back to his apartment, he was puking all over the place and passed out before, I think before she even went to Jay's apartment and had him deal with her. So while I do think that he was irresponsible in a sense of getting as messed up as he did and letting her get as messed up as she did, he couldn't really have much involvement past that. And maybe it's just a personality thing and personal security thing as to why he was so defensive and combative when confronted by police and reporters, because at some point in the night he was very intoxicated and under the influence too. And if it wasn't for the fact that we had the surveillance camera footage showing Lauren leaving by herself from their apartment complex at 4:30 in the morning, we would probably still be suspicious of him, but we know that she left there without anybody. And whether or not she made it onto College Avenue or not, that's a different story. But at that point, she was verified to be alone in the last spotting that we had of her in surveillance footage. Now, compared to the previous case that I covered, this case certainly has a lot more information that leads all the way up to the moment that the person of interest has disappeared. And that might sound like it makes for a better video and we have a lot more evidence. It leaves room for a lot less speculation, other than speculating of those very last moments that she was seen, or the moments right after she was last seen. And due to the fact that we haven't found her, we really haven't been introduced to anything new. If we had found her remains or found her somewhere else, far away from campus, somewhere far out of town, then it would have added new questions to this. However, we have basically a play-by-play of the full night before her disappearance, and it seems like she was gone in the blink of an eye. I think that in the state that she was in, it would be easy for somebody to try and take advantage of her. And While I've pointed out in that area there are a lot of balconies that look over basically every viewpoint that she could have possibly walked on her path from Corey and Jay's apartment complex back to Smallwood. It was the summer, and a lot of those housings are student housing off campus, and maybe 50%, that might be generous, of those apartments are occupied at that time. So they're not really going to be paying attention to one person. And you hear people drunk walking down the sidewalk on a nightly basis. So it's probably not something that people were looking out at as a super strange event. Now, I would like to speculate on this more, especially since I have personal experience living so close to where this happened. All I can say is that it seems almost impossible for somebody to just disappear that easily in that crowded of an area. And I never really, in my time there, saw Bloomington as a dangerous place. At least not that part of Bloomington. Again, it was primarily occupied by students. All the apartment buildings in that area were all off-campus student housing. Smallwood, it was one of the biggest off-campus student housing apartment complexes in Bloomington, and all the other ones were up College Avenue. So that whole area is occupied by students, and it doesn't really seem likely that she could easily disappear, but clearly that's not the case. And in this case, I don't believe the police department is really holding much back. I feel like they were trying their best to actually piece this together. And it wasn't just the Bloomington police, it was the IU police and the FBI actually got in on the case. And they're supposedly still following leads to this day. However, we aren't disclosed any information as to whether these leads are leading them anywhere, or if this is actually provided new information into the case that could give us a better picture as to what happened to Lauren that night. We're really just left in the dark. We have this whole tale of what happened that night. A lot of questions maybe to ask of the people that were with her and the decisions that her and them made that night. But those questions wouldn't really be much worth asking of a typical college student if she had just returned home that night. Again, she wasn't out at somewhere out in the middle of nowhere. She was basically in the heart of Bloomington, and somewhere pretty hard to just disappear from. So I think I'm going to be ending the video there. I know I didn't really add a ton to this. On the bright side, the video is not nearly as long and rambling as my previous one. There's a lot less that I could really add on to this, considering we had the whole night just kind of played out play by play from both witnesses and surveillance footage that we could really piece together basically up to the exact second that Lauren disappeared. So we couldn't really do much more diving into it. I think the police are on the same page where they agree that this has to be a foul play instance. There's no way she could have disappeared all on her own in the state that she was in. So yeah, that'll be the end of this video. If you would like me to cover more cases and there's a particular one that you think I should cover, please comment that. I got a lot of comments on my previous video on things I could improve upon. I also appreciate those. I'm trying to do that, and hopefully I did some of those things in this video. Some of the technical issues like with the music and stuff like that. So feel free to do that, and if there's future cases that you want me to cover, I will definitely love to do the research and do a video on that as well. And I hope to keep making these in my free time. I really enjoy this, so if you made it to the end of the video, thank you for watching, and thanks.